Hello and thank you for being here. I am the former classroom teacher turned homeschooling mom and private reading tutor behind Little Otters Learn, and here on my YouTube channel as well as over on my Instagram page and my blog, I offer different homeschooling topics and tips as well as curriculum reviews and flip-throughs like this one. So today's curriculum that I'm reviewing is going along with my series of honest and accurate U.S. history curriculum. In our homeschool, we have a value of teaching honest and accurate U.S. history, even the more difficult points, but also using curriculum that instills a sense of hope, a sense of activism, and a sense of resilience. So when I had reviewed a few other curricula, the folks behind Resilient Panda, it's a husband and wife team, Essie and Shinfu, had reached out to me on Instagram and asked if I would like to take a look at one of their Streams curriculum. Now, Streams is a Asian American history curriculum. They have a couple different versions and they're working on more. This is the Chinese American history. They also have a Korean American history and they're working on Japanese American history. I'm going to be sharing a coupon code at the end of this that you can use to get a percentage off any of their curriculum, the Streams and a timeline curriculum that they have. If you want to take a look at their website, you're going to go to www.resilientpandahistory.com. I'm also going to link in the notes here an interview that they did here on YouTube with an account called Mandarin Mamas. It's a great interview. Do check it out. It gives a little bit more background information on how they came to create this. So as I had mentioned, Resilient Panda is this husband and wife team, and like some of the other history curriculum that I've reviewed here, they found that teaching their own children, there was a need for this type of curriculum. So they created it. I'm really grateful for these creative and thoughtful curricula developers that are also homeschooling parents. They see a need or a gap in the curriculum and they develop it for their own children and then further adapt it so that the rest of us can benefit from it too. This particular Chinese American history for kids, I believe, is a little bit longer than the Korean American history, but it follows the same format. This is meant for children ages 6 to 12, roughly grades 1 to 6. It contains poems, books, videos, and other resources, and it's organized chronologically through 8 weekly lessons. You can certainly cover them in an 8-week time period, or you can stretch the curriculum out. There's plenty of resources to do so. You can use the week titles and subtitles at the top of each lesson to insert these lessons into an existing U.S. history curriculum. So I'm going to get into this. I'm not going to flip through the whole curriculum out of respect for them, but I am going to show you some of the beginning introductory resources as well as a couple lessons. You should note that the cover is much prettier than you see here. My printer only prints in black and white. This was published in 2023, so this is very current. So the lesson format is a 2-page spread, and your first page is going to include core resources such as the reading of a picture book, some sort of link to a video, poetry, maybe a section from a chapter book. The chapter book that I'll show you in a moment is appropriate for grades 4 to 6. And there's also another book that is a series of mini biographies that are referenced here. The second page of each lesson, so this is the core resources, that's the first page of each lesson. The second page of each lesson is a supplemental resources page, and this is going to include a timeline section with 2 to 4 events from the time period that the students can include in a timeline notebook or a book of centuries. We use a School Nest timeline notebook, and you can also find additional resources like books, videos, and other websites listed here. So if you wanted to just kind of cover the core resources like the foundation, you would just stick with that first page, and if time allowed, or if you're stretching this curriculum out, or if you just want to go in more in depth based on your personal interests, you would tap into the supplemental resources page. There's a few different resources or a few different symbols that you should note throughout. There's this symbol to represent when you're going to be linked to a website, and this one when you're going to be linked to a video. And then there's also asterisks, and that is just going to note when something might be a little bit more appropriate for older students, or something you might want to avoid if you have sensitive students or younger children. I do want to note that there's also in the appendix links to books that are great for adults. Maybe I'll just show them right now. And I always really appreciate a curriculum that acknowledges that the parents who are facilitating the lessons might also do some learning or maybe some relearning. pertaining to the particular group of people or time period. So I love having a resource that I can also read maybe ahead of doing this curriculum with my own kids, or maybe alongside them. So this is, as you're going to see, a literature-rich curriculum. The opening section here has information about all of the different types of books and resources that you're going to be using, as well as what you're going to be doing in a final capstone lesson at the end. So let's take a look at 2 different lessons. So again, this is the first page, so this is your core resources. I like that there is the years covered here, as well as some topics. That's really helpful because if you're going to be inserting this into an existing U.S. history curriculum, it's very easy to sort of know the time period that these particular resources pertain to. You're going to, access the picture book that's listed at the top. I think almost all the lessons begin with a picture book, which I personally love. There's always like a brief description of it. The picture books are beautiful. They've easily accessed through my local library. You can obviously buy copies. I'm sorry if there's a glare on this, but the illustrations are beautiful. We've actually read this book before. And it has a good amount of information. And then there's another book that's written by the same author that is used. There's a video. There are links to some poems. There's also these poems in this book. Now, this book about Angel Island, it has poetry that was kind of scrawled on the walls of Angel Island. Definitely check out that interview that they did with Mandarin Mamas, because they do a really nice job of describing this. It is a very moving, very powerful part of our history that I had no idea about. So check out that interview. I'll link it below. But if you can't get the book, which I actually couldn't get the book through interlibrary loan, there are links to some of the poems that you can find on a website. In addition, if you look in the appendix, the first 4 weeks of the curriculum, that's when you're using this book. There are like discussion points for the poems, because you might not be able to sort of easily interpret the poem. So there's like a whole set of questions and kind of guidance, which I really appreciate. So there's poetry. The chapter book is more appropriate for kids that are a little bit older. So maybe you would, if you're doing this as a family style subject, you would, do the core resources with the family, and then maybe you're reading this to an older child, or reading it with them, or assigning it to them. And again, you're going to see that there is like a nice little description of each of the books here. I just think that's kind of helpful. This is the second page, so these are your supplemental materials. Here's your timeline events that you can put in your timeline notebook or your book of centuries. Here's your supplemental materials. Again, I think I was able to, besides the book of poems, I'm trying to think, besides the book of poems about pertaining to Angel Island, I was able to get all of these books from interlibrary loan. So you have a couple more picture books. You have this symbol here to acknowledge that this is a video that you're going to watch, and then here is a website you're going to check out. So you can see it's resource rich, but it's not overwhelming. You could easily, move through these over the course of a week. So that's lesson 1. I'm just going to show you one other lesson so that you can sort of see the format again. So you have your lesson title with your years, the topics that are covered. You're opening with 2 different picture books. Again, you have the author, you have the name of the book, you have a brief description of it. I was able to get both of these books from my library. I actually have them in our book bin. A couple of videos. I noticed that all of the videos are very short, like they're easily shown maybe during lunch or as an introduction to the lesson. And I really appreciate that, because, we're teaching children and their attention span can sort of diminish. The poetry section is right here. So again, because this is within the first 4 weeks, you're using the Angel Island poem book, and then links to some of the poems here. Not all of the poems are available on this website, but some of them are. And then what section you're going to be reading in the chapter book that's appropriate for kids in grades 4 to 6. I'm going to flip to the appendix. So this is an example of the kind of like poem analysis tool that they have provided for the Angel Island poetry book. They say at some point in here, and I think also in the interview, that Poetry is a like a subject that is taught in traditional Chinese education, but it's not really covered in the same way in typical American schools. So that kind of like acknowledgement is what is providing us with this extra guidance, which I really like. Okay, and then the other appendix is the adult books that are going to help you to sort of learn alongside your children. I have this one too upstairs. Okay, so I'm gonna flip back over here, and if you have any questions, please let me know down below. I'm really grateful to Essie. She was the one that I was messaging with mostly on Instagram, and just the work that they're doing over at Resilient Panda. Please do follow them on Instagram. Check out their website. I'm going to link that interview below. This is just so nicely done. You could, cover this in a year. You could stretch it to 2 years. You could incorporate it into a U.S. history curriculum. You could, you could cover this during like a Heritage Month. It is really nicely done. The resources are accessible at, I would say, most local libraries. And, honestly, after looking through this and reading through some of these books are books that I'm going to, buy so that we have in our actual collection. If you have any questions, let me know down below. The coupon code is OTTER, OTTER 15. You can get 15% off of any of the resources, the Chinese American History for Kids streams, or the Korean American History for Kids stream, the Timeline resource, and any of their bundles that are already discounted. That's very, very generous. So thank you very much, Resilient Panda. And don't forget that they do have a Japanese American History for Kids streams coming out soon. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching.